All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our regular meeting of the Municipal Council. Supposed to start at 7. We're at 8:21 and counting, so we'll get this going. I'll start off just by acknowledging that the lands we're meeting on are the traditional territories of the Coast and Strait Salish peoples. Specifically, we recognize the Lekwungen-speaking people known today as the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations, that their connections to these lands continue to this day. I also want to just make note that all these proceedings will be live streamed and recorded for future archival purposes. Before we begin our meeting, I just want to have a motion to amend the agenda. We'd like to bring, as we normally do following a public hearing, item number 10, which is the HRA discussion,
So
forward
moved.
to number second on the agenda. Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, opposed, none opposed. So before we get to that, we'll do the adoption of the minutes. So if anybody wishes to pull any, maybe just signal me and we can do them one at a time. And if there's no changes to any of the four, then we will just move them all.
I'll move a motion to adopt all 4 minutes of July 22nd, August 6th, August 22nd, and September 5th.
So moved, seconded, and any other discussion, changes, omissions? All those in favor, opposed, none opposed. With that, we are now on item 10 of the agenda, which is the HRA for 2031 Runnymede Avenue. So I'll just give everyone a second here to bring up that application on your iPads or on notes. And we'll start the conversation here. I will go back at this point to council. If there's any clarifying questions, then I will go to take this back to staff. Councillor Ney, and then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To staff, I have a few clarification queries to staff. The first one, I'm wondering about the distinction between a designation and an HRA and what they have to offer. And what I'm really looking for is clarification of the issue of the limits of designation. It's based on questions and comments made by members of the public that came to the mic. And what I'm specifically looking for here is if you could speak to how it is that the HRA is able to, and I'm reading from point 4.2, preserve, rehabilitate, restore, maintain heritage, and how that is more limited with a designation of a property.
Ms. Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. So a heritage designation bylaw protects whatever is listed in that bylaw. So most heritage designation bylaws you will see are usually referring to a building or an accessory building or some type of structure that you want to protect. Some designation bylaws, as in this case, speak to the building and the lands. It's not specific on what any of the features are, but it speaks to the lands in general. So that says that this site is a protected heritage site. A heritage revitalization agreement, the way the legislation is written, it doesn't even have to be a designated property that is subject to a heritage revitalization agreement. It's a property that has heritage value. And under the legislation, what you can do is vary the bylaws, select bylaws of a municipality to achieve something that is both of benefit to the municipality as well as the homeowner. So, for example, in this instance, we can look at facilitating a 2-lot subdivision, allowing for the secondary suite and providing for variances through the zoning bylaw. The heritage designation bylaw is exactly that. It says you are protected. The revitalization agreement says, yes, you're of heritage value. What can we do to accommodate the heritage value and achieve something else?
So just to follow up through you, Mayor, then although the designation provides protection, it doesn't necessarily ensure, it can't require preservation as you can stipulate in the agreement on an HRA. I'm just wondering if you could speak to that.
That's correct. So the agreement can hold a number of provisions in it, and it's those clauses that are the agreement between the homeowner and the municipality. The designation bylaw just says that you are protected. It doesn't say that you have to do anything to maintain it, just that this is a designated protected site. So if you've got a homeowner who is on limited income, they're in a heritage home, they can't afford to fix the property up, they may be subject to some funds through a heritage program, but is that enough to accommodate a $300,000 upgrade? That it's unlikely that they would be able to achieve that. So you may see, I'm not saying this would happen, but you may see a home that continues to deteriorate over time. With the Heritage Revitalization Agreement for the district, we historically have been saying, now we want to enter into an agreement where you will maintain this home over time so it does not fall into a state of disrepair.
Through the covenant, they become legally bound to uphold that agreement and the preservation and upkeep of that property.
That's correct. Through this agreement is registered to the title of their property, and they are bound to proceed to uphold and maintenance.
Okay, thank you very much. So through you, Mayor, just another point here. So I'm wondering if you could provide further clarification around the siting and design covenant part of the agreement. Pardon me? Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. What I would seek clarification about is I'm understanding from the comments made through staff that that covenant would provide control to the municipality. But what I'm wondering is where precisely does it get defined, and when and how does the siting and design features get defined?
As part of a subdivision process, one of the conditions would be to register that siting and design covenant to the title of the property, so that any time a homeowner would want to do something on that property, whether they're building the new house, whether they're looking at altering the exterior of the house, if it's something that's affecting the design of the home, they would be coming back to council for that final approval.
And through you, Mayor, I'm just wondering, there's been concern about the driveway and the road there that's been described as a blind corner. And I notice on the plan that there's a driveway on the larger property that's would be on the northeast side, and then the proposed lot line for the new subdivided property would be just to the on that north side and to the east. What I'm asking, could it be closer, like closer to that lot line between the larger house and the newly proposed one, or like would that be a consideration about the blind corner where that driveway would be sited, I guess is the question.
Through you, Chair. The specifics about how a new lot to be serviced would be something that we'd look at a later date. But the bottom line standards are we factor in things like sight lines, location, and impact to the street and the neighboring properties when we review proposals for how to service the properties. So we haven't seen any specifics about any future proposals because we don't have those in front of us, but that's our general practice for all development and subdivision, is to apply municipal standards of safety and sight lines and so on in terms of access to the transportation network.
Okay, thank you. And then just finally, regarding the siting and design covenant, so how did the decision making go in terms of consideration of the property to the immediate north of the proposed subdivided property? It's a bit vague, but I'm just wondering what kind of consideration would be given to, shadowing and privacy, height. Height would go with the zoning, but yeah, privacy.
please.
The staff can't answer your question because our microphones are struggling here a little bit. Just that you fiddle with those. I will
Test,
maybe,
test.
yeah, we'll just move the. Thank
Tonight's
you.
challenge, technology.
You notice our director
Um,
of building and planning was doing the microphone work, which
I-
is other duties as
I'm
assigned.
against my own mic, but so if I may go back, can I just clarify? Is the question about the proposed new lot and how we might apply our architectural siting and design to that consideration, to the approval of that?
In consideration
Okay.
of the property immediate north of that.
All right. So we're guided by what's contained in the HRA, and that includes the agreement and the conservation plan, and the intentions that are set out around this property. And we have a designated home and property also as part of this condition. So when we look at, council particularly looks at architectural siting and design, the context for your consideration is the adjacent property and the plan for conservation and the principles that you've protected on that adjacent property. How is the new house and development on that property working in relationship to what you've protected, both through the HRA and initially through that designation bylaw? So it's basically a attention to and a reference to identified heritage values and features that are represented by the heritage home and property that's there. And I know that's not, you just look at this set of guidelines answer, but it is your context for the development of a new house on a lot adjacent and subdivided from a property that was subject to an HRA and a designation bylaw is what you use as reference and what staff would use as part of our review and presentation to you. So.
Then just one more question. Then, I mean, it would be an RS4 zoning. So in terms of square footage and footprint, would that be varied in consideration to the context, et cetera, that you've described, or is that set because it's RS4?
Ms. Jensen, if your microphone works.
It does work. I think it's working. Okay. So with the RS4 zoning, we would be looking to what is the maximum that they could build on that site. So we would estimate, we would have to do the calculations for whatever was proposed. We would estimate that you could have a square footage of around 5,100 square feet. That doesn't mean that somebody's going to build at that amount. And so that would be part of the process that we usually see when we're working through with the design panel and then on to council is how are they taking into consideration the neighborhood, the specifics of the site, and what do they ultimately end up building.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And then finally, I'm just wondering if I could get some clarification on sort of the sequencing of this HRA and the work that has been undertaken on the property. Because typically, but not always, an HRA would have been negotiated up front before the applicants underwent this enormous amount of work, and we'd know where we are at this point. But that wasn't done. And so my question is, does that matter?
Ms. Jensen.
There's nothing in the legislation that says when an HRA can or cannot happen. I would note that for this particular application, this application was made in July of 2016. So there was a significant amount of work that had not yet been completed on the house. The applicants have chosen, they're living there, to continue working on the home as they also work through this process at the same time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. I have in order Councillors Patterson, Braithwaite, and Green, and then Zelka.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, a clarification to follow up on Councillor Ney's questions. For the design and siting of the new house, relevant to the heritage house, would that application for the new house actually go back to the Heritage Commission for their input on the impact of the proposed new build on the heritage designated property?
Ms. Jensen?
Typically, the process that we have for citing and design covenants, it is actually runs through our advisory design panel, and then it would come forward to council for their decision. That doesn't preclude if council wanted to direct it to send it to the Heritage Commission as well.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. No further questions there. Councillor Braithwaite, and then Green, and then Zelka.
Sorry, I was writing something, and so I may have just missed Councillor Patterson's question, so I'm hoping this is not the same one. I just was hoping through you, Mayor, I was hoping that staff could explain what, because this has been brought up by a number of people who spoke about the fact that this had not gone back to Heritage Commission first for their consideration before coming to council. So I'm wondering what the process would be to send this back to Heritage Commission for their opinion, and how would it affect the application as it stands right now, or the process that this application is going through.
Ms. Jensen, are you wanting to ask? This is a procedural question in terms of, we have had a public hearing, we're considering third reading.
Yeah, we're just confirming. Should council decide to refer this back to the Heritage Commission at this point in time, that technically would be new information. We would have to come back to council for amended readings and back through public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. Okay, Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And through you, Mayor, to Ms. Jensen or Mr. Anderson. So the advisory design panel, to which I am council liaison as it happens, I'm very impressed with the caliber of their decision making. I'm understanding from the question that Councillor Ney posed that for citing and design, according to a covenant, this would go to the advisory design panel, and they would use, and this is the question, would they use the same framework that they use for the uplands, which is the majority of the work that they do? Thank you.
Ms. Jensen.
Yeah, anything that's in the citing design covenant is not subject to the uplands guidelines. What I have historically seen the design panel doing is they do consider the neighborhood context, the adjacent properties, oversight, design itself, etc.
Thank you.
I now have Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. I do take solace knowing that if this is approved, that there will be controls placed on the lot 1 for the new building with respect to citing and design covenant. And I have similar questions to other councillors in terms of what that process looks like. And it sounds like council, if they choose, they can send it to Heritage. They could send it to APC if they choose. Basically, council is free to draw upon the expertise, not just of staff, but also of various commissions and committees as necessary, as we choose.
That is correct.
So with respect to that, I wanted to ask, just imagining what it might look like, I also heard our Director of Engineering talk about application of normal district standards with respect to roadways and laneways and improvements. And if I recall correctly, in some of our other rural-looking laneways, there was some consternation with the improvements that were brought in. And I would imagine in this rural, rather lovely area, there would be some concern if, for example, at least in this new area, sidewalks were installed, or modern definition of a roadway was installed, similar, following completely the Oak Bay District standards for this laneway area, in particular Runnymede Place. With respect to what that rural character of the streetscape could be, I wanted to ask how would staff or how could council have some input on maintaining the characteristic of the streetscape with respect to the city services that are being put in, the roadway improvements that would potentially be put in, and other things under our control?
I'll put this to Mr. Haran, but perhaps it might try rephrasing it a little bit to ask, what would there be changes to the roadway or other aspects of the public interface with this subdivision approach?
Through the chair, for all developments that happen that are done under the subdivision development bylaw, the requirement for the developer is to provide access to municipal services, so that's sewer, water, storm, and the transportation network. And in those developments, that usually involves improvements along the frontage, and they're done on a case-by-case basis. And there's, in this case, the answer I gave a few minutes ago was just to tell the council and the audience that as we look at developments, we factor in those important criteria, which is things like sightlines and safety and how those accesses to services impact neighbors and the community at large. So we do that on a case-by-case basis. And in this case, we haven't seen anything specific in terms of what a future development would look like. So it's very difficult for me to answer further than that.
Thank you very much.
And
Councillor Zelka?
I appreciate the fact that in this situation where there is no, for example, heritage conservation area guidelines in place, there's no streetscape plan in place, it would be very difficult for staff in some ways to know how much or how much to hold back in terms of maintaining the characteristic of the streetscape and the neighborhood context. Without, maybe from a place of wanting to do the right thing, we end up doing the wrong thing for the neighbors. This is related to my next question, and they kind of both go together, because when I go back to bylaw number 3343, enacted October 14th, 1980, and it appears to make reference to the original, what's it called again? Condition. Oh my God, I don't have all my notes in front of me. Statement of significance that makes reference to the actual land, and the bylaw itself also speaks very specifically about the land at 2031 Runnymede Avenue, more particularly the entire Lot E, which, when it's translated into the terms of what we're talking about here, would be Lot 1 and Lot 2. In addition to what's described as a 2,918 square foot building, are designated under the Heritage Conservation Act as it existed at that time. And I understand that Conservation Act was quite different than the Conservation Act that we have today. So I would like to ask staff if they could please clarify, what did it mean then, and with this act still in existence today, under the new Heritage Conservation Act, what does it mean to have the land being designated, and how is that something that we could use to help guide us in the future? For example, with respect to streetscapes and rural laneway characters and neighborhood contexts and those sorts of things.
So there's probably, I'll add to that, there's land, property, and structures that are sometimes come under designation, maybe a little clarification of where those fit. And we have Mr. Anderson answering the question. Thank you.
Yes. So the Heritage Designation Bylaw, it is there, as Ms. Jensen mentioned, to protect heritage property. That's its primary goal. In the case of bylaws that have been drafted in the past, they were very simple, and they spoke typically to the heritage home and the land, and that was what was contained in the bylaw. That's the bylaw that we have for this property. Newer iterations of designation bylaws may also speak more specifically to heritage features on a property and speak to landscape features, possibly even in the interior details in a building. But the bylaws are more fulsome now than they were then. But I just want to be clear that the bylaw that's in place on this property is the old version that basically says heritage home this size on this land, and that's the extent of it. So the basis for a heritage designation bylaw, and Deb, please help me, but the basis is the identification of the heritage values through a statement of significance. And while that is, and I will turn to Ms. Jensen, while that is the basic support for the bylaw, it doesn't have the status that the bylaw has in terms of what we apply in our rigor of review of development. So here we fast forward to, let's say today, and we have a proposed heritage revitalization agreement and a conservation plan and associated proposed changes that are part of that package, but we have a statement of significance that also is supporting the principles that we're trying to implement in the proposed HRA. And that's really the package that causes the newer, more fulsome look to the property than going back and trying to interpret more into the existing designation bylaw. So we're, as it's been mentioned, I think this evening, the Heritage Revitalization Agreement and the tools that come along with it do provide us with some more abilities to manage the full heritage protection of properties, again, with the agreement of the property owner. So I think we're just with two different eras of bylaws. There's more in a designation bylaw today than there was back then, but with an HRA, there's more added to how we implement our tools in terms of heritage protection.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
So
Councillor Zelka?
I'll have to agree with you. The era of this bylaw does in some ways remind me of what those what have been called land contracts, which I understand the province is trying to get rid of across because they're old-fashioned and basically they don't really fit in with the modern way of land usage controls that we try to have today. So I get your point. So help me understand then. The bylaw that we're being asked to pass today in section 7.2 specifically says that Lot 1 is exempt from the requirements to obtain an approved heritage alteration permit for any works that would be done on that lands. However, is bylaw 3343 still in force on Lot 1?
Ms. Jensen.
Thank you. So to confirm, yes, that heritage designation bylaw would still apply to both of those properties. The clause that you're referring to, it was, I don't want to call it a simpler process, but it seemed more realistic to look after the siting and design of a new home on that property to be managed through that siting and design covenant. So we could really focus on the design of that building, whether that's, again, whether that's a new build or they choose to do something at a later point in time to the new home. Whereas a heritage alteration permit would really be looking at, if you've got if you have a house that's now sitting there for 5 years and they choose to want to do something to it, it doesn't make much sense to run it through a heritage alteration permit when there's no heritage attached to that new building. So rather than using the heritage alteration permit process, you would use the siting and design process. The designation bylaw still applies to the land.
Well, I absolutely support the approach you're taking for a situation like this. It makes sense. And the reality is that the designation of the land would still exist going forward, even though there wouldn't be a heritage alteration permit needed. And we'll be going through this alternate process with respect to siting and design with respect to the context of the adjoining heritage home. And I understand that completely. I support that. I got to tell you, I would not want to be the approving officer for a situation like this because there obviously needs to be a bit of sensitivity with respect to the fact that, yes, we have siting and design controls, but it's in a context of designated lands with respect to a working, old, granted, but a working and still active bylaw. I would hope, and please help me understand what this could look like, that in addition to siting and design, what additional sensitivities might be brought to bear with respect to at least maintaining the rural, for example, the rural streetscape, the rural laneway character, being careful of shadowing, being careful of some of the tree aspects, just being very, very careful of blasting aspects, just anything having to do with the land. What additional sensitivities might be brought to bear in light of the fact that 3343 is still active?
Ms. Jensen?
We'll take turns. There still are a few select policies in the official community plan that we can point to, specifically ones that are speaking to streetscape. both in terms of environmental and both in terms of heritage. So those policies are still in place. But again, this comes back to a balance, which staff have spoken to before on other applications, between what we need to do to satisfy our requirements for our utilities, our infrastructure, and how that moves forward for the next 80 to 100 years. Balance that against what we have in terms of our streetscape character and wanting to protect that.
And I'll finish up with this point. It sounds like it would behoove this neighborhood to implement an heritage conservation area as quickly as possible, then to try and bring in that official sensitivity to the streetscape and rural laneway aspect that would encompass the entire area and not just be reliant on the goodwill of various neighbors. Is this an opinion you want to venture, or shall I just simply say that as a comment?
We'll take it as a comment, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Zelka. Is there any other questions arising from council of staff at this time? Councillor Green.
A last minute question through you, Mayor, to Mr. Haran. Are shared driveways a practice in Oak Bay? I know there are pre-existing shared driveways, but I just wondered if this site would lend itself to a shared driveway between the Heritage Home and a new home on the lot.
Through you, Chair, I can't speak to the specifics of this property, whether it's suitable for shared driveway, but I can say that we have contemplated shared driveways in other developments and other applications.
Thank you.
Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to staff. This is picking up a little bit on the really good points that Councillor Zelka has raised about the nature of the bylaw. I'm just curious, is there a practice I'm very much challenged by the language in the original bylaw, and the lack of specificity in the language of the bylaw makes decision-making difficult at this juncture. Is there practice to update these types of bylaws to more modern standards, to include more specificity, to make these kinds of things a little bit more streamlined? And I'm just curious, staff won't necessarily have this information, but how many more properties with lands designation like this are we likely to run into in Oak Bay?
Mr. Anderson.
I would say the majority of designated properties in Oak Bay have what I would call a historic designation bylaw, as opposed to the more recent versions. I don't believe we've designated properties in, I may be misspeaking, but certainly within the last 5 to 10 years, I don't believe we have put designation bylaws in place on properties. So we have these, but if I'm misspeaking, please, I've only been here a year. So I'm sorry, the other question, sorry, could you just throw that at me once more?
I'm just wondering.
I do recall it. My apologies.
Process to modernize.
Yeah. So we wouldn't likely undertake that. I think we would undertake that as a process of, say, entering into a mutual covenant with a property owner to further amplify or clarify the features that we were trying to protect under that, or through an HRA process. The one thing that I think I'd mentioned earlier is the statement of significance, and what's defined and demonstrated within those is actually got some value in terms of our review process when we look at changes on these properties. They often do have more specifics in there in terms of identified heritage features, and they do sometimes support those bylaws, and sometimes they're not that much more fulsome than the bylaws themselves. So,
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Seeing none. Procedurally here, I think we're just really back to this table for council to make some comments and recommendations and ultimately a motion. Councillor Zelka.
If I may ask one more question of staff, please, which is with respect to the house on the north side, if this was to go ahead and we we subdivide lot 1, and a new house gets built there. That's somehow built to a maximum size. Is there any way that through siting and design we can reduce height, or have some aspect of having some controls over the shading on the property to the north? Because with this lot 1 having a rather large promontory, or knoll, if you will, I imagine the height might be larger than what some people might like. So is this something that we could have some controls over with respect to the height of this building, in addition to siting and design?
Ms. Jensen?
A few answers to that. RS4 zoning, so they are entitled, if that new lot were put in place, they are entitled to the requirements under the RS4 zone, so maximum height, for example. Having said that, because it is a siting and design covenant, we usually do find that through that process there is some massaging of the design, which can include height and or setbacks as part of that. And I have forgotten the rest. Yeah, so I'll just confirm. It would also depend on where they're siting the home on the property, but because it is on a bit of a knoll, depending on where they site it, that will be impacted by how we determine what the average natural grade is for that site, so that can impact the height as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Anything, anybody's adding anything to that? Okay, thank you. No further questions. I'm not seeing any, so we're here back at council table. We have first, second reading completed. We've gone through public hearing. We have to decide what we're going to do with this application, if we're going to move it forward, suggest changes, or do something else. So I am just the caretaker of this meeting. I need someone on council to step forward with some thoughts. Councillor Patterson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And, I really appreciate all the comments that we've heard tonight from the applicants around the council table, and certainly also from all of the people that came out to speak. I guess in considering this, and I generally support it, and the reasons for that, we heard from Ms. Cummings about future hardship and control of the properties and what we can do on that. But when I read, and I did go to the archives and I read through all of the files, and yes, Mrs. Ellis did do a wonderful thing for the community in designating Blairgowrie to the community. The troubling aspect was she didn't fund she wasn't able to fund the continued conservation and preservation of that property. And fortunately, the applicants came forward and really did what the community wanted, and that was preserving the heritage aspect of that building. And although I've heard comments that the work is now done, and so why go forward with this now, but it does still allow council some controls. It gives us a beautiful heritage house in the community, and it leaves really 70% of the land, more than 70% of the land around that house with its gardens intact. And the applicants have also done a lovely job of restoration now on the gardens and planting new trees, because the gardens also would have really fallen into such a condition that all would have been lost. So I think the applicants have also, in addition to Mrs. Ellis, have contributed significantly to the community. So for that reason, I would move third reading of the application.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. And we're still having discussion here at this point. So as a seconder, do you want, I have Councillor Braithwaite next, but if you seconded the motion, so if you want to speak next, I'll let you go.
I really appreciate the people who come to the mic, and especially the people in this neighborhood, because it's really clear how much you care about what you have there, and it really is a very special street. I think probably all of us, when we do our walks, it's a lovely place to go down and just feel the quietness and the trees and the sense of neighborhood connection that goes on there. And the thing about this property is that, when I first got on council, it was in 2010, and this issue was coming up about this property. And it's not just about a third reading tonight. This issue about the community ensuring the longevity of this property has taken place over many years. And I know in my time here, I've lived in the community for some 35 years, it has deteriorated. And the tool that we've been using to preserve it, a designation, was not doing the job. And it was about 2011, we had a huge community outcry. Many of you were here when those protests were happening. And the real fear was that we were going to see the deterioration and demolition of this property by neglect. And the applicants have told the story about how they came onto this. And when that happened, those of us who were watching this, it felt like a rescue when they agreed to come in to look after this, because the property was near done. It really was in very bad shape. So when the applicants came forward and they spoke about their interest in doing an HRA, it made sense, because the council the day saw that they couldn't get something for nothing. It was on the market, I think, for 2 or 3 years, as the applicants have said, and nobody was taking the challenge up. And so it was clear, the HRA offers a quid pro quo kind of negotiation. The person who's going to put themselves out, they've spent like 5, 6, 7 years restoring this property, get something in exchange. And that's how the HRA, the legislation, was developed. We saw, in Oak Bay, seen hundreds of old homes toppled over the decades because there was no tool to protect them. So we have this legislation now, and that's what it's intended to do, and that's what it actually has done in this case. It's a treasure of a property that's being preserved. And I think as a community, we're very fortunate that the applicants have done this. I have confidence in the siting and design covenant, and the applicant working with staff. I think staff is very clear with what this community is looking at for, and the kind of respect that we need to render to the neighbors to the north, and it will go through our design panel that's made up of community members too. So I feel confident that that property will settle in nicely once it's completed. And so I'm going to vote in favor of the third reading.
Councillor Braithwaite and Green.
Thank you so much. A couple of things. I'm not sure if we should actually have an expectation that people would provide funding for heritage designations in perpetuity, because I think if we did that, then nobody would want to heritage designate their house. So I think that that might be something that would not be, it wouldn't behoove us to ask for that, I don't think, because I don't think we'd have anybody coming forward to designate their house. So I think that both of my fellow councillors have spoken very eloquently about their reasons for supporting this. I am so torn on this, because I'm torn between protecting Blair Gowie for more than what it presently is, and I'm torn between upholding what was put in place in 1980, because I think that's very important, and I think that's what it comes down to me. The property owners have done such a great job on fixing Blair Gowie up. It's a thing of beauty. You should be very, very proud of yourselves. However, this is not about the house, that house. This is about a subdivision. And the subdivision, I know that the HRA it protects the house, but I believe that we have to look at protecting that whole piece of property. What was the intent in 1980 was to protect that piece of property in the way that it is with the grounds in that piece of that community. That's a great community. Councillor Ney is correct. That's a beautiful community. When you look up and down Runnymede and Mountjoy, there's properties along there that are very large as well. Will those properties, once they see subdivisions starting to happen, and we already saw one happen on Mountjoy a few years back, will those properties consider wanting to subdivide as well? Will that change the whole streetscape in there? And I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I would be willing to allow something like that to happen. So again, I'm very torn. I want to protect Blair Gowie. I think that the way Blair Gowie looks right now is gorgeous, and I think it will be protected while these owners are in it. They will uphold that. They've put a lot of time and energy and money into it, and the community thanks you for that. However, I would have liked to have heard from the Heritage Commission. I would have really liked to have heard from them. So my preference would have been to send this back to Heritage. So as for third reading, I'm unfortunately not going to be able to support it. I wish I could, but I can't, because I really have to take the other comments of the neighbors into account and what the intent of the original designation was. Thank you.
Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I just want to thank everyone who spoke this evening, the neighbors, other residents, and of course the applicants for coming here. When we returned to Oak Bay in 2010, my husband and I, the first two words I heard on the street were Blair Gowie. And I heard a lot of stories about Blair Gowie, but I also know that this has been an ongoing issue in this community for at least 10 years, if not longer. I appreciate very much what neighbors are saying, and I wish, frankly, that we could protect everything in South Oak Bay at this point, and other areas. You have seen the rate of demolitions, and you have seen the kinds of subdivisions that have occurred over which we have no control. In this instance, the municipality, through an HRA and a covenant, has the opportunity to have some input, to have some control, and to protect the neighborhood and the streetscape. Having worked with the Heritage Commission for a number of years in Oak Bay, I appreciate very much their efforts to preserve heritage. And one of the tools that we all support is the Heritage Revitalization Agreement tool. It is one of the few tools that we have. And you can see that in Oak Bay, there, like Blair Gowie, there has been some challenge to preserving our built heritage. This is no one's fault, but up until approximately 4 or 5 years ago, there were no qualified planning staff in Oak Bay. And I remember when I ran for council in 2011, I said to everyone at every all candidates meeting, your concern shouldn't be about development, it should be about redevelopment. And that's exactly what happened, because I think in some ways, and I'll be bold enough to say there was a sense of complacency in Oak Bay. We're built out. What could possibly happen? What possibly happened, and it has occurred at a great rate of knots over the last 7 to 10 years, is that there has been a lot of development, and we have lost a lot of older homes, not necessarily heritage homes. But overall, if you look at the context in Oak Bay, and particularly in South Oak Bay, that context is a heritage context. And so how do we protect some of this? And I honestly don't know. And I would ask you, in a case like this, how do we protect this house and property going forward if we don't enter into an agreement with owners who have been passionate about restoring the house? tell me how we will do this in the future if there is nothing set aside to ensure through an HRA that the property is maintained, that restoration is ongoing, that there is consideration ongoing for the neighborhood and streetscape. Honestly, it's a question that I've asked myself 1,000 times. If we can't do it this way, then how do we do it? And Blair Gowie, from my understanding, was on the verge of demolition when these owners bought it. And I remember going by it many times and feeling really sad that a house was allowed to get to that state. And other houses in Oak Bay that are even better than that are getting torn down. So that house was so vulnerable, and I'm not sure what would have happened if new owners hadn't taken it over and began the process of restoration. And that's the whole purpose of heritage revitalization agreements. The community gets an iconic home and 70% of the property protected, and the owner has a chance to recompense, I'm sure, the 7 figures that they have probably spent on that garden and house to date. This isn't just a development. This is a preservation plan. And I really ask you to consider how important that is, because I'm very concerned that the Heritage Revitalization Agreement tool in Oak Bay is starting to get a bad rep. I'm concerned that this is one tool that we can use to preserve properties that have heritage value. And the heritage value isn't just for immediate neighbors. When the Heritage Commission undertook a survey in 2013, 89% of respondents said that they valued the heritage of Oak Bay, and they didn't live on a street where there was a heritage house or near a heritage house. They were from all over the municipality. So we know how important it is. I also would like this to have gone back to the Heritage Commission, but I've done as much as I can to glean an understanding of how the Commission feels about this proposal. As well, Jean Sparks, and I think many of you might know Jean Sparks. She's one of the most revered heritage volunteers in Oak Bay. She supports this proposal, and that carries a lot of credibility for me, because if there is anyone who is fiercer or more passionate about heritage preservation and conservation in Oak Bay, you wouldn't find anyone more committed than Jean Sparks in terms of her reputation. So I will support this proposal, and I also sit as heritage liaison, as council liaison to the advisory design panel, and I know how much time and effort they make to ensure that these designs and sightings are respectful. So I thank you for your time, and I will support this.
Do either of the other two councillors wish to speak? Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm very, very challenged by this decision, and I do very much appreciate the time that everybody has taken from the community to come out and speak to this. Because I am so challenged by the decision making and definitely confronted with, you know, the reality and the knowledge that the impending loss of this house was of great concern to the community, even before I arrived in the community, and certainly long before I was on council. Recognizing that that was a significant point for the community, and recognizing how much time and effort has been put in by the applicants to restore that property. When I find myself in these positions, it gives me no other option than to sort of withdraw to what the letter of our own legislation puts in front of me. And that is the original Heritage Designation Bylaw, which designates both the house and the lands. And so for that reason, I'm not in support of the motion. I don't see how the subdivided parcel can adhere to the original spirit of the bylaw, as imperfect as it is, in my opinion, because it doesn't provide us very much direction or very much content. When I review the statement of significance, which is put together by people who are much more knowledgeable about heritage than I am, I see clearly that the context of the house on its property is important to the significance of the property. And clearly the original selection of the siting of the property, well, basically the selection of the property and where the house would sit on it was of significance and was selected for a purpose, then I need to understand or need to interpret what the original designation of the lands then meant. So it is as simple for me as going to the legislation, going to the bylaw of ours that is applicable to this site, and it talks about the designation of the lands. I want to make it clear that I am not in principle opposed to subdivision of lands as part of an HRA. I believe that the HRA is a powerful tool. Councillor Green's comments about the use of the HRA, I agree 100% with. The HRA should, in my opinion, be employed more often to conserve more heritage properties in Oak Bay. There's no doubt in my mind about that. So again, this gives me a lot of pause to have to make to make a comment to not be in support of this. It is a very challenging thing, and I will just I feel somewhat. I feel like that's an overly simplistic answer on my part, an overly simplistic interpretation on my part to something which is not at all simple, but that is the best information that I have available in front of me, and that's what I'm basing my decision on.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for all my councillors with their very good points that they brought forward, and they've already repeated many of the points that I was going to make as well. A heritage revitalization agreement. I mean, the whole point of heritage, it has to be living and breathing and has to be future oriented. I do note the wonderful gift the Ellises provided with the designation of this house, a gift to the community. But I have to agree that, unfortunately, the house fell into disrepair. I do know some others in the community actually who are thinking of the future and who are actually considering designating their house with a fund to ensure that that property will be maintained as they saw with respect to their vision. So it's strange but true. Sometimes it does happen where folks put their money where their mouth is to see that their wishes get absolutely fulfilled into the future. Unfortunately, in this situation, that did not occur. So here we are with a Heritage Revitalization Agreement to ensure that this fabric of the community is revitalized and maintained for at least the next generation. Because I've heard from staff that a siting and design covenant will be put in place and that we will have some measure of control over what the new building could look like and the size of it and some aspect of how it will be within the context of the adjoining heritage home. And because the original bylaw is continuing with the original statement of significance on the original lot, whatever that means, I'm not quite sure actually how it will be actually implemented or how it will be maintained, because it is such an unusual thing to designate terraced gardens as heritage. But I would hope that at the very least it would bring some sensitivity to our staff with respect to how they treat the property at the property's edge to maintain the rural character of that until better controls are put in place, such as a heritage conservation area, so that that whole area can maintain its absolute beauty and its absolute welcome aspect. For these reasons and a few others, I will be supporting this motion going forward. I don't know what the new lot is going to look like. I don't know what the new house is going to look like. I can tell you that what's there right now is absolutely awful, built in 1950, and most likely paid for by the subdivision of those lots down on Falkland, the lots A, B, C, and D that used to be part of this property. and they were subdivided off back in the 50s. In fact, I understand the lands for the school further on what it was at one time part of this property, going back into the archives. It was quite a large property at one point. So that's, I believe, part of the living, breathing aspect of the heritage going forward. So for those reasons, I will be supporting this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelk. Does anybody else want to add any other additional comments here before I speak? Councillor Ney, go ahead.
I'd just like to comment on, this is my understanding, but the heritage bylaws that we have in effect are premised on the statement of significance. And the statement of significance are representations of the values of the community of that day. But they are living documents, and they are not cast in stone. So a statement of significance, though it truly represents the that was 40 years old, say in 1980, does truly represent the values of the people of that day, but people's values change over time. And so the agreements, as I've understood them from people who do this heritage work, need to be understood within the context of the current day and the values and conditions and circumstances that we're faced with at that time. I just wanted that.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. And Councillor Patterson, you wanted to add one more?
Yes, thank you. It's been, I've really appreciated hearing the comments of all of my fellow councillors around the table and their opinions on this. You know, for me, it still does come back to, we heard the statements that if we proceeded with this, that in fact we would be sending a message to the development community that Oak Bay did not protect heritage. I take the opposite position, and that is, if we are not willing to actually look at options like HRAs to preserve heritage, I think that the risk is far greater to the community, and we will lose more heritage. And the one strong point about an HRA that goes beyond the designation process is that it does give the community the ability to require that inspection records be kept up on the property, be reviewed by the district, and every 5 years that we can require an inspection be done, so that we not only have we regained this beautiful property for the community, but we have an ongoing sense of being able to monitor, give advice, and perhaps ensure the continued existence of the lovely home. But there is still a piece of the lot, which is lot 1 that we're talking about tonight, that still does need to have some restoration done. The buildings that were there, the old pool filled with rubble, that must all be addressed. And I don't think from an environmental aspect I would want to see a swimming pool reinstated. So, sometimes on these heritage revitalizations, it is not a perfect world. It is a negotiation, and the council has a tough job. The Heritage Commission has the tough job of trying to assess what they're given and determine the best path forward in perhaps not a perfect situation, but a strong desire to preserve the heritage of the community, both the built heritage and the natural heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Green, you wanted to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to add a couple of comments on a couple of points. One was on the secondary suite. One of the other tools that is used to preserve heritage homes, large homes, are heritage conversions. And I know a number of homes, I think here, there may be one here or two here in Oak Bay and elsewhere, where in order to save the house and save the built heritage, they turned them into suites, which also provided densification that did not alter the streetscape and preserve the neighborhood. So I just want to make that point on the suite, on the secondary suite. And secondly, I also wanted to add that I hope that these HRAs are going to build community rather than divide community. And I made these similar comments at the last meeting that involved an HRA in Oak Bay. These should be positive tools and positive experiences. And I know the Oak Bay Heritage Commission in particular, it works so hard and has worked so hard for so long to get some traction on some of these proposals. And frankly, I would like us to rally around these proposals rather than start pushing back against them, because ultimately there will be a greater loss over time. I believe that. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further comments, I'll limit my comments, but I will just say how much I do appreciate everybody who came out here and the very respectful and thoughtful tone of everybody's comments at the microphone, and also how much thought and attention council has put into this deliberation of this thing. I think it's clear there's no easy right answer on this one. I think there's a shared value of trying to protect and celebrate and support people who are actively protecting built heritage, and I think it'd be remiss if I didn't thank the applicants just for the work that they've done on this very iconic house to this date without any promise of reward. I do have concerns with the application as is, and I'll just be clear. I don't actually object to a subdivision. I don't object to most of the aspects of it. Where I would fall down on my preference was actually in the previous application, where we had absolute certainty of the built that was attached to it. So the applicants provided the designed home as part of the application package, and it provided more certainty to us as a body. And I still think that is the preferred model for these. I do respect and recognize that it's going to fall to this body again for us to approve the siting and the design, and so we'll be held accountable for that decision when it comes, if this passes. But my overall preference on this one would be that we follow these in a path that has a specificity to the application more than relying on our siting and design. Because at the end of the day, there is a number of rights of the landowner to build to the zoning, and that may or may not always suit the type of lots, and particularly ones like this, which are larger than normal. And I will just address that as well. I had some concerns about the size of the lot, and at the end of the day, I see the transition between this very large lot and the secondary lots beside it as being quite appropriate. In fact, I thought the work done by staff to come up with that. So this really boils down to me at the end of the day, which is sort of odd. Is the siting and design provide enough protection to it or not? And I have to say, I tend to fall on the side of the not. I tend to not vote on these items unless I'm a swing vote on it. So I may or may not vote on this one. But I would say that I would have a very hard time and make recommendation for us going forward that we try and nail down the siting and design of the secondary lots if this does pass in future, because I think that is an intrinsic part of getting community buy-in to the overall process. But that being said, is there any other further comments? I will then call the question of third reading of Bylaw 4696. All those in favor? All those opposed? And I'll add my hand to the opposed. I think that I do, however, appreciate that that's I'm not terribly upset this is going forward. So it does pass on a 4-3 vote. So I should read aloud for the record. Councillor Appleton, Councillor Braithwaite, and myself opposed. Thank you very much for that. We now move on to, I'll give everybody a chance to take a break and stand up, and if you want to move, staying here, but, so we have to move adoption as well. Sorry, I also need to move motion for adoption.
I'll move it. Oh.
Move adoption, seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? 2 opposed, Braithwaite and Appleton. Thank you very much. If I could ask kindly to people to leave reasonably quietly and quickly. We do have other business to attend to tonight, and people have been waiting patiently. Councillor Zelka? I'm not going to call a recess, but if people need to leave quickly for biological, go ahead. All right, everybody's been waiting very patiently tonight, so I'm going to get on and move the agenda forward. If I can ask people to take their seats, and we'll move on. Oops, I better get my notes back here. We are on to item number 2 on the agenda. If I can just ask for people's indulgence, which is mayor's remarks. And all I can say is, boy, welcome back. We came back with a doozy after a little summer break to come back to this one. It's nice to be back, and a couple of quick things just to point out. One is, if anybody wants a printed copy of our annual report, it is printed and available and full of information and a bit of a divergence in the sense that we tried to standardize some of the statistics and some of the information for year over year, and provide a more sort of 360 review of the budgeting and strategic planning process. I want to thank all of the organizers of the activities over the summer. There's been a lot, from the business improvement associations, night markets and other activities, to the community dances and the live music and movie and everything else that have gone on. And I won't go into details, but I just want to express my appreciation to all of the staff in particular who organized all of those events. And the Arts Laureate and Arts team who did a lot of the Arts Fortnight activities that went on with their partners. I also want to just thank former Fire Chief Dave Cockle and team and the staff for starting the process of doing some much needed maintenance on this building. It's just a coat of paint and some replacement of carpeting, but it's making a world of difference with some new lights and things. So thank you for that, and you'll see more of that coming. I also just want to point out that the Urban Wildlife Stewardship Society has started their immunocontraception process as of last Wednesday, I believe was the first day. And I also want to express my appreciation to the community for opening up their yards. We made a call to the community if they would allow people preemptively to go into their yard if they saw a deer, and we've had over 600 properties volunteer their properties to that effect. And if you haven't, please do. That's going to be going on for a number of weeks still as the window allowed is open. So thank you very much for that. And I also just finally want to raise, there was obviously a fair bit of interest from the public on 1558 Beach Drive. And so just so everybody here in attendance understands, this will be brought up under some options for the municipality around that under new business. So a little bit later under number 7 on the agenda. So there is no agenda item for it, but the council has the option of looking at a couple of options at that time. That is my comments. I think everybody would appreciate brief comments today. So up next we have a public participation period. And again, if people want to come forward, you're more than welcome to. We have up to 20 minutes available in this time slot. And each member of the public is welcome to speak for up to 3 minutes. It has to be on items related to Oak Bay. And that you just follow a similar process to the last meeting that we had, that you all sat through, which is just leave your name and your municipality of residence. And if you could write your name down as well, then our minutes will be accurate. So thank you. And you're going to have to sit down because we seem to be having some problems with this microphone not broadcasting properly to our webcast. So yes, just hit the button in front till there we go. Your light is red and your time has started. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Michael Prince, and I'm a resident of Oak Bay. First, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Salish peoples on which land we're meeting tonight, and where I think most of us live and work and play too. But I just wanted to set that tone. I want to speak, Mr. Mayor and Council, about 1558 Beach Drive, the J.W. Morris Garden Mansion property. Specifically as triggered by the recent permit applications for that property. My central message to you tonight is simple, yet also substantial. No private property is an island entire of itself. Every property is a connected piece of the community, a part of the social fabric of our Indigenous and settler histories. There is always a public interest and a community good at stake. I think, as Councillor Green mentioned a few minutes ago about the public polls and surveys that have been done about the residents of this district municipality, there is very strong and widespread recognition of that. The idea that there's a public interest, community good, is especially evident with 1558 Beach Drive, with its potentially great archaeological importance, a property with long-standing rental housing for several individuals and families, a landmark structure of unquestioned architectural merit, First Nation interest, and heritage significance. As Councillor Ney said a few minutes ago on another item, this too is a treasure of a property. If the J.W. Morris home at 1558 Beach is taken away, its foundation destroyed, and the garage demolished, Oak Bay is the lesser for it. The loss of this extraordinary home, if allowed, would diminish us all, not only the official community plan or the district's heritage strategic plan, but the neighborhood and the wider community. And to all of those of us who have been working so hard in our commitment to the preservation of built and natural landscape, to the successful launch of the long-awaited Heritage Conservation Area. We're now in our 4th year. And because we care about our community, those who are here tonight, although modest in numbers, we're hanging in, are joined by hundreds of others through correspondence and by petition to sound the alarm bell and to issue a positive and proactive call for action. And if I can be excused a little literary finish and flourish, you need not ask for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Prince. Again, we're just trying not to cheer inside. That's the secret. Go ahead, please.
Mayor and Council, my name is Ken Grant. I live next door to 1558 Beach Drive. I am strongly opposed to the removal of the J.W. Morris house, as this would be a great loss to the community. Excluding the uplands, very few historic mansions with their original front gardens intact remain along Oak Bay's scenic drive. The Morris house is the last survivor on the west side. Having stood for over a century, it has long been an iconic landmark enjoyed by residents, visitors, and tourists, giving people a historic snapshot of Oak Bay's early days. The next significant heritage house and front garden along Beach Drive's west side is 644 Beach Drive, the Boyd residence, also owned by Abstract, which is busy infilling the front and back gardens with ultra-modern houses. May I recommend that Council add the Morris House property, located in the heart of the Oak Bay's first HCA, to the Community Register, Heritage Register tonight without a request for a report from the Planning Department? I understand that this would be unusual. However, in this case, the property has already been flagged for inclusion in the Prospect HCA as a scheduled property, and as such will become a protected heritage property. Therefore, it can be argued that Council has the planning report in hand. We also know from Bruce Anderson's excellent report to Council on the viability of placing 1561 York Place on the Community Heritage Register 2 months ago, that there are no financial implications associated with placing heritage structures on the Oak Bay Community Heritage Register, nor is there a legal requirement for a formal statement of significance. Please vote to register the Morris House at 1558 Beach Drive tonight, or go one better and designate it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker would like to come forward.
Mayor and Council, my name is Barb Grant. I live to the immediate southeast of 1558 Beach Drive. As a former member of Oak Bay's Heritage Conservation Area Working Group, I urge you to do all in your power to prevent the removal of the historic J.W. Morris House at 1558 Beach Drive. A lot of time and effort went into creating the guidelines for the Heritage Conservation Area, and the municipal staff and our mayor were part of the process. The guidelines recommend the retention and conservation of all heritage resources within the Prospect neighborhood, and list 1558 Beach Drive as a scheduled property. Undoubtedly, the Morris House is worthy of retention and protection for the benefit of the community and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grant. The next speaker would like to come forward. I'm just cognizant of the fact that we have 20 minutes in total, so I want to make sure we get to as many people as possible.
Your Honor, my name is Bob Wallace. I live on Prospect Place in Oak Bay. Mine is probably the shortest one you've ever heard, but it's very simple. My glasses. Whoops.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Wallace.
When's the election come? Here's what I'd like to say, very simply. The people who live and have lived at 1558 Beach Drive have told me they are there because of the house and of the community and its location. A couple have also shared with me, meeting on the street, why they are there, and they're very disappointed in the way that the building, since it is being bought by the Abstract Corporation, has been run down and let become very, very disarray. The previous presentation in front of you, you lauded people who took on old houses and improved them. This has been exactly the opposite. And therefore, I believe, as my previous speaker said, that you consider designating. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Anybody else wish to come forward?
Your Honor, councilors, my name is John Tiffany. I live on York Place in Oak Bay. I would like to briefly discuss the possibility of a First Nations midden on the location of 1558 Beach Drive. Oak Bay is situated on Gungan traditional territory, as is acknowledged at the start of every council meeting. There has been a recently discovered midden in the nearby neighborhood of 1558 Beach Drive, and that midden is currently being assessed. The nearby Broker Creek midden was and is well known, of course, to First Nations people, but even Francis Rattenbury mentioned it in the early 1900s when writing home to England. At nearby Turkey Head, there is an Oak Bay heritage plaque which was installed in 2008, which states, quote, "A large shell midden along this shoreline indicates that this was an ancient village site to which First Nations people brought many fish, bird, mammal, and plant resources," end of quote. I sincerely hope that no permits will be granted nor any activity on the 1558 Beach Drive lot occurs until a proper archaeological assessment has been done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tiffany. Welcome.
Thank you, Council and Mayor. My name is Callum Abbott, and I'm a practicing archaeologist. I've resided in Victoria for the last 10 years, did all my training at UVic, and I'm also a current resident of 1558 Beach Drive, and I'm facing eviction from the home that I love very much. Within the specific context of proposed developments at 1558 Beach Drive, I want to make it clear that the likelihood that unrecorded archaeological deposits will be encountered is extremely high. This assessment of high archaeological potential is based upon a review of the Remote Access to Archaeological Data, or RAD, which is a database maintained by the provincial government, or the archaeology branch of the provincial government. Earlier today, I sent a letter to all of you, and attached to that letter was a map showing the spatial distribution of recorded archaeological sites around 1558 and the surrounding area. I'll note that there's a notably high density of recorded archaeological sites surrounding the 1558 Beach Drive land parcel in all cardinal directions. Two sites in particular, DCRT 256 and DCRT 168, are located immediately adjacent to the southern boundary of 1558. We're talking on the order of less than a centimeter. Importantly, the current site boundaries of DCRT 256 and DCRT 168 are arbitrarily defined by the land parcel boundaries of the two neighboring lots to the south of 1558. Indeed, this is the case with many of the archaeological sites in Oak Bay, as archaeological assessments and studies within urban contexts are often limited to the extent of private landowners' property. While there are already many recorded archaeological sites in the area, they are only a small portion of the true extent of protected archaeological sites in Oak Bay. So, this leads me to recommend that the proponent contracts a qualified archaeologist to hold a Heritage Conservation Act Section 14 Heritage Inspection Permit from the Archaeology Branch. This assessment must occur before any construction, renovation, or land altering activities begin, because any archaeological deposits or materials that may be located within, beneath, or around the foundations of the J.W. Morris House that currently stands at 1558 are protected sites under the Heritage Conservation Act.
Just so you know, that was your 3-minute beep. So if
I
you
have
could
one
just wrap
more
it up.
sentence.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
In order to reduce conflict of interest and to facilitate nation-to-nation reconciliation, I recommend that the individual or corporation contracted by the proponent to hold a Section 14 Heritage Inspection Permit must be approved by the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations before any permit applications occur. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abbott. Yeah, if you just would have write down your name, that's very helpful. Thank you for your time. Welcome.
Thank you. Jill Pollard, 1580 Beach Drive. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The Pollard family has a deep connection to the John W. Morris House, located at 1558 Beach Drive, which is a pinnacle property in the proposed Heritage Conservation Area. This magnificent landmark was owned by my in-laws for over 25 years, selling the property approximately 14 years ago. The mansion, which had been divided into suites, and its garage were lovingly cared for during their ownership. This grand home, which has exceptional bones, oozes character from the early 1900s throughout the building. The gardens were meticulously maintained. The streetscape views from both Beach Drive and Prospect Place were a showstopper and are still admired by those who visit the area today. This historical home, garage, and rock walls deserves heritage designation and unquestionably a positive future in its present location. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to come forward and speak?
My name is Paul Ziakin. I'm a resident of 1558 Beach Drive. I've lived there going on 6 years now. Very small garden suite, lovely place. It's been my home. And I want to bring up something that has not been mentioned in this meeting today, and that is income housing for people with lower incomes. I'm retired. I'm on a very limited pension. It seems reasonable to think that, to consider that this is an opportunity for this community to maintain and keep some reasonably priced housing for people of lower incomes. I would like you to have that in mind while you're considering. The other thing is how in heaven's name were they allowed to even apply for a demolition permit before they submitted their eviction notices to us prior to submitting for the demolition permits? I'm not even sure that that's legal, but I'm not a lawyer. So anyway, thank you for your consideration. I really appreciate your consideration and your thought about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming out tonight. Is there anyone else who wishes to come forward and speak to council?
My name is Robert Craig, and I live in Prospect Place. And I'd just like to speak to the demolition of this. I sat through the entire process of the previous Runnymede discussion, and I've sensed a swaying of values, pro and people worried about developers moving in, about developing, getting their foot in the door, this and heritage being at stake. If the council allows the destruction of 1558 Beach, I think the community will be in a lot of trouble as far as supporting what you're trying to do in the way of preserving heritage. You'll have lost some credibility, I think. This next bit, I'll have to ask. I know it's late in the day, and I'm going to speak in a way that some way you may not understand everything I'm trying to get across. Virtues: passion, courage, prudence, justice, wisdom. All things you have to consider. I know there's a lot of passion on this whole heritage issue, and I know that we all need to have courage at this time in pursuing our collective objectives. And I've seen prudence on the part of the council in trying to balance all the factors in which you've been dealing with. But I think justice comes in here. Justice demands that we act. I think we've got a moral imperative here. And some of you might say, what justice? Justice for whom? It's an open question. But one thing we know for sure, that it's something greater than individual greed. And I think wisdom will tell us that justice is necessary in this case, in what you're dealing with here. And so I think it's time for the mayor and the council to be guided by these virtues in deciding on these important issues before them. And when they do, if they make correct decisions, they'll have the community behind them. I don't think they should bow down to the pressures of those who are working against the greater issues of the majority of Oak Bay residents, and for that matter, Victoria as well. I'm sure you'll get it right, and God bless you in your efforts, but for goodness sake, don't let them tear the place down. How was that?
Best timing ever on that one, I think, is because it actually concludes our 20 minutes allotted under our procedures bylaw as well. So that was absolutely perfect. Thank you so much for that. And thank you, everybody, for coming out and speaking. Oh, yes, please make sure everybody's written down their name if you haven't yet. We're going to move on to item number 5, which is the Oak Bay Advisory Planning Commission minutes. Oh, sorry, item number 4, sorry. All this hard work and I almost skipped over it. This is not good. Can I just have a quick question, though? I'm sorry, I should know this better than I do, but we've been so good about getting out of here on time. I can't remember. Do we have to make a motion to go past 10 or 10:30? 10:30. Okay, so we'll definitely try and get things wrapped up by then. So item number 4, sorry, this is the council resolution tracking list. Can I get a motion to receive just first to start us off?
Move
And then we can talk about it?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there questions or comments from council to staff? Councillor Green, then Councillor Zelka.
Through you, Mayor, I would just like to thank council. No, not council. I would like to thank staff for making this available to us. I believe this is the first time in Oak Bay's recent council history that we have had the ability now to track and follow action items and decision items and priorities. So I'm really grateful to all of you for doing this, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka.
There we go. Wonderful. Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to comment on this. Thank you also for this list. I much appreciate the opportunity to track things going forward in a much more effective way. I do note that it begins in November 2018, and I know we tried to well, not as apparently efficiently and effectively as this appears to be. In the past, tried to track some aspects from in previous councils. If we're not going to be going back beyond previous to November 2018, I'm imagining staff would appreciate if those of us who brought forward motions in the past might bring them forward again. Maybe further notice of motions to have council again pass them so that they can get on this list. I just was wondering if staff wanted to comment on an approach like that, or if maybe they want to offer another approach. I think, for example, of the motions that I brought forward, such as on steep slopes and hazards and some other aspects that came forward in previous councils. I would hate to see them being lost. Suggestions from council, please. Excuse me, from staff.
I'll go to Ms. Varela on this one.
Thank you, Your Worship. So what staff would recommend is that if council has identified something that is outstanding, I'd just like to be made aware of the topic, and then we can go back and search the minutes, pull that resolution up, identify whether it's been addressed, and if it hasn't, we'll refer it to the list. But you can imagine if we were just hunting and pecking through past minutes, how difficult that could be. So we take this as a cooperative effort going forward, and welcome those items that may be outstanding that we could address for you.
That would be very helpful, and thank you. I look forward to working with you on that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know that some of those were sitting in strategic priorities and a wait list and things that weren't motions, but they're sitting in there. And I think those are captured largely and being brought forward to the next. Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions? I'll just express my appreciation as well. It's a great first step to this, being able to sort of quickly see what's gone on and how to track it. And I know staff are really open. If there's suggestions on how to make it better, you can just raise them, and where they make sense, I'll add it. Councillor Braithwaite?
Sorry, I did have one question. Just where is it going to be stored, and how is it going to be accessible? Is it becoming in our agendas monthly, or?
The proposal, unless directed otherwise by council, is to bring it back quarterly. The items that you've now seen as completed will drop off because we're trying to keep the list small and manageable, but there is the master list that staff has available, so that at any time if council wants to go back and review that database in its entirety, it's available for you.
Thank you. And it'd be nice maybe to have something on the website as well, so under the council and page, just to have this as a list of ongoing pieces, if that's possible. I won't direct that, but if it's possible, it might be a helpful thing for people to see where things are sitting in the legislative agenda. All right, so we have a motion to receive. All those in favor? Opposed? And opposed. Thank you very much. Unanimous. Look at that. We are moving on to item number 5, the Oak Bay Advisory Planning Commission minutes.
Move receipt.
Moved and seconded for receipt. Any discussion? All those in favor? Oh, Councillor Zelka, sorry.
I'm sorry. I apologize, Chair. I'm trying to keep up with staff with half of my minutes over here, or notes, and half my notes over here. I apologize.
No, take your
So
time.
with respect to these minutes, I noticed that in item number 4A, that the consultant who was hired by the district to review council committees and commissions suggested that there might be a report back to the committee of the whole, maybe in September. I wanted to ask on the status of that, since it's before us at this moment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Zelka, is there an update? Ms. Varela?
Thank you, Your Worship. So actually, we met with the consultant today, and we will just be coordinating the timing of that meeting coming forward. I do have to make sure that all of council can be in attendance. And so I'm not committing to a date yet, but I can say I met today, and I will be reaching out to you all shortly. We're considering holding a special so that you can focus specifically on that report.
I think that would be appropriate. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Ms. Varela. Seeing no other discussion, the motion to receive is on the table. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Item number 6, advisory design panel minutes.
I'll
July
move.
2nd.
I'll move receipt.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Corrections? Questions? All right. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Item number 7, new business and verbal reports. I'm going to jump in here on this one to start with, specifically around 1558. And I think there's a large number of people in the audience here interested in this. Council obviously has become aware that a number of building permit applications have been made on the property at 1558 Beach Drive. They include a permit to move the existing building off the property, a permit to demolish the foundation and accessory building, and a permit for a new single-family home on the property. The property currently, as some people mentioned, has no formal heritage status, i.e. isn't on the heritage register currently. However, it is in an area that is under consideration for a heritage conservation area, and there are information sources indicating significant heritage value to the home. So I guess I'm looking here. If council's interested in looking at options for this property, council could direct staff to report back to council at our September 12th meeting. That's this coming Thursday. And that report would indicate whether there is sufficient heritage value to warrant implementing a 60-day temporary protection order, to determine whether the property may be considered heritage property under the Local Government Act. The temporary protection order would give council an opportunity to explore available options for heritage protection of the building. So if council wishes to consider this at the September 12th meeting, that would give staff time to notify the owner, which is best practice, that we are considering a temporary protection order, and give the owner the opportunity to attend the meeting and speak to council. So if that's the will of council, that would be just motion to direct staff to report
I'll
back to
make that
council.
motion.
And I will definitely second.
I'll sec. Oh,
Is there any discussion on that?
I just to ask for potential clarification. So we're asking you staff to report back, and then at the next meeting we might actually act on whatever they report back on.
Correct.
But is there any concern about protection between now and then?
I'll look to staff for that, but Mr. Anderson?
No, it's reasonable for council to consider a temporary protection order on September 12th, and we would still have the ability to ensure we can protect that property at this time.
Councillor Braithwaite and Green?
Would now be appropriate for me to ask a question that came up from the public participation?
You may.
Okay. And it was just around, and I'm not sure if we have anything to do with this whatsoever, but it was around the eviction notices being given before a demolition permit has been given. Is that something that we would have any control over, or anything that we could do anything about?
I'll turn to Mr. Anderson for that.
No, that they're not directly related. The eviction notice can be provided by the landlord, whether there's a demo permit or not in play.
Thank you, Councillor Green.
thank you, Mayor. On that note, around Councillor Braithwaite's concern, I'm very concerned about the issue of displacing these tenants. I think that's a huge issue for me right now, and so I don't know, and I don't want to interfere with the process now that we're under, but I don't know when the eviction notice was given and for what period. I don't know how many. So I'm just wondering if the 60 days that we potentially would be looking at, would that be enough to protect the current tenants as well?
I think they're two separate issues entirely. Mr. Anderson?
They are. I think it would be appropriate for council to first consider the placement of a temporary protection order, and then there could be subsequent information requested of staff to bring back to council regarding options related to further protection, if possible, for the property.
Just a supplemental comment, and I agree, and I know they're very separate issues, but they are also related on another level. So I appreciate your input, and I just want to register publicly my concern about these people.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Any other, Councillor Selka?
For what it's worth, I'll register my concern as well. The intent, for example, of heritage revitalization agreement, of designations, of those sorts of approaches to heritage is to one approach that's quite reasonable. It was even mentioned earlier on, was to do a heritage conversion, and it seems ironic that here we have what appears to be already a heritage converted property that's potentially being suggested that might go to in some other direction. So this concerns me greatly with respect to the values and the approaches of our OCP and our heritage moving forward. So I just wanted to register a concern in that area.
Thank you for that, and I think that'll be a reasonable topic of conversation on Thursday. But will the Councillor Alpelin?
Thank you, Your Worship, for your indulgence. And the risk of beating this to death, I just want to express my thanks to the folks who are residents at the building. We don't hear enough at council from renters and people who rent in our community. So I know it is a rare thing. We need your voice and we need to hear your context. So in as much as I can register that on the formal record here through these minutes, that it hopefully will encourage renters to come to speak to us and express their views. I just wanted to say thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Councillor Applin, for expressing that. Seeing no other discussion, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. So September 12th will be a date of people of interest to come back here and have that. We'll have that report I brought back from staff at that time. So thank you for that. We have any other new business at this time? Okay, then we then move on to reports on the CRD. I'm just going to give a very brief update. There was a report coming to the CRD this week, just recommending that the CRD ask for the provincial support in managing deer. So we'll see if it's just an ask. But I think something that's quite interesting to people here is people are probably somewhat aware of the regional housing first process that's been going underway. And actually, I'll leave that for another date. I'll leave it for another date. There's nothing urgent about it, and it'll come back here. We're running low on time. So I'll just go to members of council for other. If I could just ask people to keep their voices down while we're just finishing off our agenda item. We do want to get through this before the day of the. So I'll go around the table. Councillor Appleton, I'll start with you. Is there anything you have update from other verbal reports from other committees and commissions?
Not from other committees and commissions, but I did want to note that I participated in the Tweed Ride on Sunday, which took place in Oak Bay, which was a really positive event, and it was great to showcase our community. I had some opportunity to talk to some of the people who were on the ride about various different buildings around South Oak Bay because they were asking questions. A brief tone of seriousness, though, although the Tweed Ride is not a closed event, it takes place on open streets, and so there is traffic circulating. The members of the Greater Victoria Cycling Coalition have people shepherding the ride and essentially coming up and essentially closing intersections temporarily to allow bikes to pass. They're very knowledgeable and very conscientious about how they do this. I was concerned on a couple of different occasions about the behavior of some of the motorists, to be honest with you. Some things which were impolite and some things borderline, like actually physically dangerous. So because it takes place in the middle of the day on Sunday, I mean, you don't know exactly who the folks are that are driving around, but because it's the middle of the day on Sunday, there's a reasonable expectation that a lot of them could be Oak Bay residents. So I just wanted to note that this is an important and a beneficial and a positive event, and there were some representations there on behalf of drivers that weren't that positive, and thankfully, of course, nothing dangerous, or nobody was injured or overly concerned, but I was a little disappointed in that. So it's just a note as far as when we talk about safer streets and when we talk about infrastructure, this is sort of it in reality.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Braithwaite?
I just want to reiterate something that you said at the beginning, which is a thank you to the Parks, Rec, and Culture staff, and especially Karen Manders, who put together such great activities over the summer for us for culture and for our arts and culture days. It was really, really awesome what she managed to do. So I think she deserves special recognition. And don't forget, it's a night market this week. This is the last one tomorrow.
Wednesday. Councillor Green?
Yes, just that I attended the Advisory Design Panel meeting and the Oak Bay Tourism Committee meeting this week.
Thank you. Councillor Ney, Councillor Patterson, anything to?
Thank you, Mayor. There's not many people left to make this announcement to, but for those that are here and for members of council, just wanted to remind everybody September 18th at 2 p.m. Oak Bay Archives, in partnership with the Greater Victoria Public Library, present Oak Bay's Sealand of the Pacific, More Than Just Whales, with guest speaker Kathy Denny. And you can register online with the GVPL. So that's at 2 p.m. in the afternoon in the library meeting room, and at 7 o'clock the same day, at 7 o'clock in the evening, for those who can't get out for Heritage in the afternoon, at 7 p.m. in the Windsor Pavilion, the Heritage Foundation presents an illustrated history of Art Deco in Oak Bay with artist-author Mary Conley as the guest speaker. So mark your calendar, and if you can make one, that's great. And if you can make two, even better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I would just point out those library ones are almost always sold out, so you do have to register ahead of time if you want to attend. Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, the Oak Bay Emergency Program is continuing to look for volunteers, especially the radio program, if anyone wanted to join up with that one, and we can have some fun together. There's some new tools coming down from the province, so there'll be a lot of training coming up in the next year, and opportunities to learn. Thanks.
Thank you. I've already given my mayor's report, adequate for the evening and the time of night. So if we might move on to resolutions. We have resolution on item number 8, 2019 Livable Cities Forum, approval of attendance. We have a request from Councillor Ney.
I'll move approval.
Moved and seconded. It probably does not need a lot of attention. If I may, could we expand this approval to other councillors that might want to attend? I think if there's other interest, this item is often not in Victoria. It's generally on the mainland and costs an awful lot of money for people to attend. So the relative cost here is quite low. So I don't know if this is going to bankrupt our council training budget, or if that would cause maybe we can have a maximum limit number of people that could attend. Sorry, I raised this at the last second without asking staff first. My apologies.
Thank you. I'm sure we can accommodate that in budget somewhere. Do we have an indication, or would council just like to authorize any councillor who wants to attend?
Yeah. Why don't we say up to yeah, it's not something I think I expect Councillor, if only Councillor Ney attends, she would bring back information from it to the council. So it's not necessary for everybody to attend. I just thought there may be some other interest in this as well. So given it just leaves it a bit more open if people are willing. Councillor Green.
Yes, just to reiterate what you just said, I would really appreciate hearing about it for those who attend and bring something back. Thank you.
Thank you. So can we have a motion to amend this to allow up to, say,
I'll move amendment.
Second.
Up to 5 people to attend. Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? Is that a request? Okay. Do we have a move to amendment to make it up to 5 attendees? So I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed on the main motion, which now includes up to 5. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you very much. We are now on to we've gone through item number 10. And the last item before adjournment, bylaw number 4736, Oak Bay Business Improvement Area Bylaw 2020. And I'll just give this to, is it Mr. Anderson that would, or who would give a quick overview of Ms. Hopkins?
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is in response to the budget discussions we had earlier in the year when the BIA came and presented their budget. Their bylaw is about to expire at the end of this year, and so they have requested that council renew the bylaw for another 5 years. And by doing so, if you do consider 3 readings and approve that, we would be looking to undertake a counter petition process to seek the approval of the impacted property owners.
Thank you, Ms. Hopkins. We'll do this as if we get first and second reading together, then we can have any debate, and then we'll move to third reading. So if I can have a mover first
I'll
and second.
move first and second reading of bylaw 4736, Oak Bay Business Improvement Area bylaw.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? We can ask questions at this time, yeah.
If I may, a quick question through you to staff. We're increasing it to 500,000 from what? Or
Ms. Hopkins?
It was from 450,000.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, and okay, seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor, opposed, and just need third reading.
Move third reading of bylaw 4736, Oak Bay Business Improvement Area bylaw 2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, opposed, none opposed. Thank you very much. And that brings us to
move adjournment.
Thank you. All those in favor, opposed, none opposed. Magic. Thank you very much, everybody, for your patience tonight.